In more than 60 years, they captivated crowds and left an unforgettable legacy on stage and screen. On September 26, 2024, the world said goodbye to an icon. There was more to Kris Kristofferson than just a man. People of all ages looked up to him and respected him. Some people thought his voice made songs that were written with the soul in mind. Others saw him as the actor who brought each character to life with honesty and toughness. For those who were lucky enough to know him, he was a true friend whose heart was as big as his ability. But one thing was clear. It didn't matter how people saw him. Kris Kristofferson was a famous person. Kris did, however, have some secrets. The kind of secrets that never get out in the open. And before he died, Kris told the world some very private and heartbreaking things about his life that shocked everyone. But to really understand how important these last statements are, let's go back in time and remember the best parts of Kris's amazing journey. Kris Kristofferson wasn't like most kids his age in Texas. He was born in Brownsville, Texas, on June 22, 1936. He was the oldest of 3 children in a strict military family that moved around a lot, but his family finally settled down in San Mateo, California, just in time for him to start junior high school. By the time Kris graduated from high school in 1954, he was already showing signs of the artistic genius that would build his career. He fell in love with writing, especially the works of author William Blake, while he was at Pomona College in Southern California. Kris didn't just play, he was great at it. Several awards were given to him for his work, including the Atlantic Monthly's top prize in a short story contest. Not only did he love books though, as well as being great at football, he tried his hand at Golden Gloves fighting and showed that he was tough as well. Kris won the Rhodes Scholarship and went to Oxford to study literature after finishing with honors in 1958. Leaving his studies behind, he went to England to start writing songs. He played in bars under the name Kris Kristofferson and recorded a few songs for a small label, but nothing really took off. He didn't know what to do after getting his degree, so he went back to the United States. Kris made a quick turn when he had to make a big choice. Instead of going to school, he did what his family had always done and joined the U.S. Army. He learned how to be a ranger and a helicopter pilot, and he was finally sent to West Germany. But music was always close to him, even when he was far away from home. He even formed a band with other soldiers and played at different events, keeping his artistic spirit alive while he served his country. By 1965, Kristofferson had made his way up to the rank of captain and was offered a job as an English teacher at West Point, which most people would consider a dream job. But one trip to Nashville that summer changed everything. It seemed like his life was on the right track. The city's musical energy got to him, and all of a sudden, he didn't want to stay in the service. Kris did something brave when he turned down the West Point gig, quit the service, and began a new uncertain journey to become a country music songwriter. It wasn't just a change in jobs, it was a big step into the future, and his family paid a very high price for it. Kris's parents, especially his mother, were heartbroken by his choice. They thought he had given up a good job for a dream. Due to the stress, Kris didn't talk to his mother for more than 20 years. Kris felt the weight of his decisions a lot at this point. He was working a bunch of different jobs to make money and trying to make a name for himself in the music business. He also had to pay a lot of hospital bills because his son had a problem with his esophagus, which made things even more stressful. His personal life got worse, and in 1968, he and his wife split up. At this time, one of his jobs was to sweep the floors at the Nashville Columbia recording studios. Even though it looked like a dead-end job, Kris met June Carter in this boring role. He took the chance to give her a tape of his songs and asked her to give it to Johnny Cash. Cash famously threw it on top of a stack of other tapes while she did it, leaving Kris on the waiting list. At the same time, Kristofferson worked as a professional helicopter pilot for Petroleum Helicopters International in South Louisiana to make money. He spent 3 years going back and forth between flying helicopters, sitting on oil rigs, and going back to Nashville to get his songs heard. Even though it was hard work, this time was artistically productive. Help Me Make It Through the Night, and Me and Bobby McGee, 2 of his biggest hits, were written on the oil rigs during those long, quiet hours. But Kris was getting desperate and trying everything to get into the music business at this point. And you know what they say, when things are bad, you have to do desperate things. He chose to literally take things into his own hands a few weeks after giving June Carter his tapes. Kris flew a helicopter and parked it right in Johnny Cash's front yard. This is a crazy move that has become part of music history. That caught Cash's attention for sure. After hearing Sunday Morning Coming Down, Cash knew he had something great and made the choice to record it. People really liked the song. Kristofferson won Song of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards in 1970 for it. It was a nice break for him. Before that, his songs were slowly becoming more popular. Vietnam Blues was Dave Dudley's first song, which came out in 1966. Even though his 1967 Golden Idol album Killing Time didn't do well, other singers started to pay attention. His music was played by country stars like Roy Drusky, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Roger Miller. By the end of the 1960s, Kristofferson was becoming known as a singer with a deep raw sense of telling stories through songs like From the Bottle to the Bottom and Me and Bobby McGee. Me and Bobby McGee, by Janis Joplin, on the other hand, really took him to the next level. When it came out after Joplin's death in 1971, her version of the song went straight to #1 and stayed there for weeks. Suddenly, everyone wanted to write songs like Kristofferson. Kenny Rogers, Ray Price, and even the country star Kenny Rogers were recording his songs. Had gone from being an oil rig pilot with a dream to being one of the most sought-after musicians in the business in what seemed like an instant. And this was just the start. By the early 1970s, Kris Kristofferson was having a lot of fun. There were some bumps in the road though, like in any good story. People loved his second album, The Silver-Tongued Devil and I, which came out in 1971. It made him famous, not only as a musician, but also as a full-fledged recording artist. A lot of people were moved by songs like Love and Her Was Easier, and it wasn't long before Hollywood called. Kris's first movie role was in The Last One, which was directed by Dennis Hopper. He also appeared at the Isle of Wight Festival, rubbing shoulders with the biggest names in rock at the time. He was making more money in areas other than country music. Kris Kristofferson went from being a pretty unknown musician to a big name in country music by the end of 1971. His songs were all over the place, and 3 of them were nominated for multiple Grammy Awards. It was clear that Kris had shown up. He won the Grammy for Best Country Song in March 1972 for Help Me Make It Through the Night. This was the official start of his rise to fame. Soon after, Kris put out Jesus Is a Capricorn in 1972. It was a huge hit thanks to his first #1 country song, Why Me? 500,000 copies of the record were sold, and by November 1973, it was at the top of the country charts. This proved that Kris wasn't just passing through, he was here to stay. While Kris's work was going through a lot of change, his personal life was also changing. Following the end of his first marriage, he fell in love with another singer, Rita Coolidge. Not only did they date, but they also made songs together, which fans loved. In 1973, their first record together, Full Moon, went straight to the top of the country charts. And their songs From the Bottle to the Bottom and Lover, Please won 2 Grammys. They were the dream country music couple for a while, on and off the stage. Spooky Ladies Sideshow, Who's to Bless and Who's to Blame, and Surreal Thing were Kris's solo records during this time. They did okay, but not as well as the A Star Is Born soundtrack, which he worked on with Barbra Streisand. That music was #1 on the Billboard 200 and sold more than 4 million copies by 1977, making it platinum. It was a hit in more than one genre. It became a big hit, which made Kris even more famous. Kris put out a few more records in the late 1970s, including Easter Island and Shake Hands with the Devil. He also put out his last album with Coolidge, Natural Act, as a duet artist, before the two broke up. Kris's music kept moving people, even after his marriage to Rita ended. Country music stars like Willie Nelson kept playing his songs, and they even worked together on projects. Kris Kristofferson's life was like being on a roller ride in the 1980s and 1990s. He had both successes and failures. Even though he kept putting out solo records like To the Bone in 1981, Third World Warrior in 1990, and A Moment of Forever in 1995, it was his work with other artists and on movies that really stood out during this time. The Winning Hand, which he worked on with famous people like Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, and Brenda Lee in 1983, was one of his best projects. It got to number 4 on Billboard's Top Country Albums chart, which showed everyone that Kris was still a big star. In 1984, Kris went back to movies and starred in Songwriter. He also contributed to the movie's music, which got him nominated for an Academy Award for Best Music. It was a big hint that he could do more than just country music. Kris remembers 1985 more than any other year. Not only did he get into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, but he also joined Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings in the country supergroup The Highwaymen. Their first record, Highwaymen, was a huge success. It went straight to number 1 on the country charts, and had a lot of memorable songs, including the Grammy-nominated title track. In the end, more than 1 million copies of the record were sold. After that, Highwaymen 2 came out in 1990, and got the group another Grammy nod, even though their 1995 record, The Road Goes On Forever, wasn't quite as popular as their first two. Even though things went up and down, Kris's musical legacy kept growing over the years, especially thanks to the famous bands he worked with, and the love he got as a songwriter. Kris was a star in the business for more than just music, though. Kris Kristofferson did more than just write some of the most famous songs ever. He also had his sights set on Hollywood. In the early 1970s, when his singing was really taking off, he jumped right into acting with Dennis Hopper's The Last Movie. He then had a string of parts where he shared the screen with big stars. He played the legendary part of Billy the Kid in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid with Gene Hackman, and he worked with Ellen Burstyn in Martin Scorsese's Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Pretty good for someone who was just starting out in movies, but A Star Is Born really put Kristofferson on the world's movie map. Kristofferson brought a raw energy to the part of an old rocker opposite Barbra Streisand. Even though most reviewers weren't really praising it, people loved it, even though the reviews weren't great, and the movie became a big hit. The music, which had both Kristofferson and Streisand on it, was also a huge hit. Kristofferson was already famous in music, but this movie made him famous in Hollywood and won him a Golden Globe for Best Actor. Things slowed down a bit after that high though. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Kristofferson was in a number of forgettable TV movies. His big screen roles in Heaven's Gate and No Place to Hide were also not very memorable. He did, however, play a highly charged part in the limited series America, which imagined a terrible future in which the USSR had taken over. Kristofferson came back strong in Lone Star, just when it looked like his starring career was ending. He showed that he was still a great actor by playing the complicated part of Sheriff Charlie Wade in this critically acclaimed movie. After that, he got parts in the Blade Vampire trilogy, the touching movie A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, and action movies like Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes and Payback with Mel Gibson. He kept working even after his big break, in smaller movies like The Motel Life and The Western Traded. Kristofferson always found a way to stay in the spotlight, whether it was through music or movies. He showed that hard work and ability can go a long way. But like a lot of other stars, he had a problem with drugs that almost killed him. Kris Kristofferson had a lot of problems with alcohol that almost ruined his life and business. He said he was a successful alcoholic in the 1960s and 1970s, relying on Jack Daniel's booze and anything else they could get their hands on. Kristofferson used booze not just as a way of life, but also as a crutch. He drank so much that he couldn't even imagine acting without a drink around his neck. During those years it became a part of his daily life and who he was. Kristofferson told people in an interview that he didn't think he would live past 30. His stomach swelled up to the size of a football because he drank so much. This was a clear sign that his body was hurting because of his addiction. He was able to stop drinking all of a sudden at one point, but the fight wasn't over. In later years he went back to old habits. He admitted that he always kept a half-gallon of Jose Cuervo in his trailer so that it was never empty. Even though he was successful as an actor and a singer, drinking almost cost him everything. He really did have to deal with addiction, just like a lot of other important people in his life. There were other problems the singer-songwriter had to deal with in his life besides drinking though. Kris Kristofferson often talked about how he felt like a fake, even though he was successful in acting and singing. He often talked about how he didn't feel like he belonged in the show business, even as he became famous and well-known. This feeling of not being real came from the fact that he didn't follow the typical path to fame. When he wasn't making music, Kristofferson was a Rhodes Scholar and an Army helicopter pilot. He always felt a little out of place with his peers. Through conversations, Kristofferson said that he always had doubts about his abilities and whether he was deserving of success. He fought with the idea that he didn't deserve his success, even after writing some of the most famous country songs and winning endless awards. Many of his fans liked him because he was honest about his fears. They thought he was humble and real. The life of one of the best entertainers of all time won't last forever, though. The quiet death of Kris Kristofferson took place at his home in Maui, Hawaii, on September 28, 2024. He was 88 years old. Even though Kristofferson's family didn't say what killed him, he had been open about his health problems in the years before he died. At first, people thought he had Alzheimer's or confusion because he had trouble remembering things, but later they found out it was Lyme disease. Even with all of these problems, Kristofferson stayed close to his family and was still a well-liked figure in both the music and movie fields. Tracy, Kris Jr., Casey, Jesse, Jody, John, Kelly, and Blake are his 8 children. He is left by his wife, Lisa Myers. Besides that, he leaves behind 7 grandkids. His family said they were thankful for the time they spent with him and the love fans had shown them over the years.